Sherelle Murphy, welcome. So inflation expected to peak in Australia around 7% or a bit beyond that. What are the options authorities have to get this under control, and how should the government be managing this to get it back down?
Good morning. Well, inflation, of course, is the purview of the Reserve Bank. So it really is up to the Reserve Bank to do what it can to pull inflation back down again. And of course, that's exactly what it's doing. There's already been some increase in interest rates. We're expecting to see much more over the year ahead. That's really the best tool that the government, that the Reserve Bank has, obviously. Now, the government can do little bits and pieces. It's doing things like bringing down the price of childcare. It's got a plan to pull those prices down. It's got a plan to try and reduce the price of pharmaceuticals. There's little things it can do there, but really when we're talking about containing aggregate demand in the economy, that's got to be left to the central bank.
Okay, so how can people on things like job seeker be expected to get by in this environment, which we're looking at for at least another year or so, when the job seeker rate of $46 a day was already seen by so many groups as inadequate?
Look, it's really difficult, isn't it? And it was particularly discouraging to see in yesterday's figures that the cost of essential goods and services are the ones that are going up the fastest. Those have risen at a rate of 7.6% over the last year, compared to those more discretionary purchases, which are only going up at 4%. That makes it particularly difficult for low-income earners. So, look, there is no easy answer here. We really have to see price growth come back under control. That's what the Reserve Bank's doing by obviously raising the cost of interest rates in the economy. That impacts both consumers and businesses, and eventually it will tame the inflation numbers a little bit next year.
I'm not sure whether you want to offer an opinion on this or not, but I'll ask the question, do you think in this environment there should be an increase in that job seeker rate?
Look, it's a difficult one because clearly the government has a lot of fiscal pressures. It's trying what it can to bring the fiscal deficit back under control. At the same time, clearly it wants to help those in need. It's a difficult balancing act. It's one for the politicians, but there's no doubt that I'm sure they're feeling a lot of pressure at the moment.
So how high do you expect interest rates will get, say for the average mortgage?
Well, markets at the moment are pricing in another 2 percentage points of increases on the cash rate. So we add a couple of percentage points to that to get the mortgage rate. So there's some way to go yet. Now, of course, we'll watch how the economy responds to this. I actually suspect that we will see things start to slow from here. Consumers are dealing with higher interest rates. They're dealing with higher inflation. Something's got to give. And those little luxuries, the discretionary type purchases, they will probably start to fall away towards the end of the year. That's actually what the Reserve Bank is trying to do here. And, hopefully we start to see that working towards the end of this year and into next year.
But there will continue to be those international pressures, which will mean there will still be inflationary pressures there. Do you expect there'll be many home mortgage defaults in Australia as this unfolds?
A few things make me think that the economy will probably withstand these rate hikes quite well. So we think about the jobs market. It's super strong at the moment. The unemployment rate, 3.5%. The workforce participation rate is at a record high. That means that we've got more people working than ever. As long as people have a job, they're usually able to maintain their mortgage repayments. It's when we start to see unemployment pick up, then it becomes difficult.
Which the Treasurer has said this morning there's likely to be a modest increase in that.
That's right. I mean, there probably will be. We are at, of course, 50-year lows on the unemployment rate. That's not to say necessarily that things will turn bad, though. There's a number of things that are positive in the Australian economy we shouldn't forget. Really high commodity prices. That's feeding through to government revenues. That's helping the economy. It's helping wages. It's helping, of course, create other work in the economy. So we shouldn't forget the positives as well as all these negatives.
Yeah. And how does this affect the ability of Australia to pay back this $1 trillion debt over time?
Paying back the debt is a big challenge when you've had to increase it so much in such a short period of time. And then when we look forward, there are a number of pressures on the fiscal situation. We think about the cost of floods, the cost of higher interest rates, the cost of COVID on the hospital system and the health system. The government's trying to meet all these challenges while at the same time bring in that budget deficit and head towards surplus. It's not easy. It's a really difficult balancing act. So really what it means is that we either have to see some increase in taxes or some lower expenditure. That's the only way that we get there.
And so taking into account the pressure on that debt, should the government be looking at some big issues like dropping those big tax cuts that are due in 2024, broadening of the GST and the taxing of superannuation?
I think the government has to consider all options at the moment. If it genuinely wants to take some of the fiscal pressure out of there and get back towards a more balanced budget, then it does have to consider these very difficult decisions. We wouldn't necessarily expect there to be any big changes at the moment, but I think that the government is certainly thinking about this over the next term. It's obviously going to be a challenging time. There is no easy fix. Sometimes difficult decisions have to be made.
Yeah, and Cheryl Murphy from EY, thanks so much for talking to us. And just as a matter of interest, are you down there in Canberra especially for this statement by the new Treasurer, or do you work out of Canberra?
I actually live and work in Canberra,
right.
Yes.
Okay. Cheryl Murphy, thanks so much for talking to us this morning.
Pleasure, thank you.